So the subject of my favorite movie has always been complicated. I gotta ask people a series of questions before I show them my favorite movie. Have you seen the Lego Movie? If so, I'll show you the Lego Movie too. Definitely my favorite film. Oh, you haven't seen the original Lego Movie? Have you seen Cars 1 and 2? Oh, you have? Then we can watch Cars 3. That's definitely my favorite film if you haven't seen the original Lego Movie. What's that? You haven't watched the original Lego Movie or Cars 1 or 2? Then my favorite film is Ugly Dolls. And unlike Cars 3, which is a deeply character driven film, and unlike the Lego Movie 2, which is a deeply character driven film, Ugly Dolls is inherently a moral work, and primarily concerned with being a moral work. Also, it got a video game. That's weird. We're gonna play as Ox just because I like his profile picture more. That is the only reason.
Hello! Welcome to Uglyville, a felt and fabric town that's home to the Ugly Dolls. My name's Lucky Bat, and I'll be your narrator for this game. And this is my tea house. Not many people know that I have a secret high-tech lair under my tea house. It's a cave, and I'm a bat, so I call it my bat catering facility. From here, we ran our underground resistance, taking the battle to the robots with daring raids to... No, wait, I'm thinking of a different game. Now, there's a whole lot of backstory which I'm going to skip. It involves perfect dolls, sneaky villains, a giant baby, and lots of singing. But all you need to know is that Uglyville has a neighboring town called Perfection. And Perfection is maintained by robots. Now, why is that important? Because one day, a robot from Perfection accidentally found its way into Uglyville. And its robot-y brain created a problem for me and my fellow Ugly Dolls. You see, everything in Uglyville is ever so slightly wonky. That's what makes it fun. But the robot wanted the town to be precise and straight, so it called more robots to help it. And suddenly, they were everywhere. It's up to you to help the Ugly Dolls get the robots home. Your first job is to close the pipe the robots keep coming through. To the gameplay!
In spite of this game taking place after the movie, it contradicts several very important events from the movie, and most of the characters are completely different from their portrayals in the film. Now, it's not as though the film had amazing characters, like Cars 3 or the Lego Movie 2 or anything, but I still liked the characters. And what's the point in having a character's likeness in a game if they're going to be completely different from the film that's based on? Just, why bother? In particular, Ox, the guy we're playing as, gets the worst of it. There are two playable characters in this game, as you saw. There's Ox and Moxie, but there's only one set of dialogue for the main character, and the dialogue was obviously written for Moxie. As a result, all the dialogue Ox speaks feels like it belongs to someone else's brain and mouth. And it's very surreal if you've seen the movie before playing the game, because you get no idea of who Ox is. At least with the other characters, you get some sort of vague idea of who they might have been in the movie. All the dialogue for the main character is written in kind of a subservient, but also go-get-'em kind of way. Like, it's all bubbly and headstrong, but also I'm gonna do what everyone else asks me to do just because I like them. And that doesn't really fit Ox so much, but it definitely fits Moxie. It's not all of who Moxie is or anything, but it's better than it is when it's attached to Ox. Let's just say that. But we'll have plenty of time to talk more about the film later. The idea behind this game, I'm not sure exactly what genre you'd call it, but it is a 3D platformer. You do collect a lot in it, so you could call it a 3D platformer collectathon, but there's also a lot of crafting, and a lot of pathfinding, and a lot of fetch quests. Do you like fetch quests? Are fetch quests your whole life? Is grinding the most important thing to you? then Ugly Dolls, the video game, is probably going to be the best day of your life. The best 3 hours of your life the first time through. It's about 2 hours if you know what you're doing. But yes, so you get one big map, you get Uglyville. You get to wander around Uglyville searching, opening boxes that contain ingredients for crafting, and then you craft gadgets to attack robots or platform or sneak around robots or just perform a bunch of goofy things with cute little items. And the general progression of events in the game is you go and talk to someone, they ask you to find something or make something, and then you find or make it for them. And then you go do that for someone else. And that is the whole game. And if that turns you off immediately, I understand. But personally, I don't think that has to be a bad thing. On this channel, you'll find a review for Monster High New Ghoulan School. And I felt pretty positively toward that game. It's basically the same as this, where it's all fetch quests. You just go talk to people and do what they ask you to do. But I enjoyed it because it's a game about helping people. And you're technically helping people in this one too. It's just, well, you're not helping people with nice things. You're not helping people for the sake of helping people. You're not even helping particularly nice people. You're helping people in service of an overarching story. And the overarching story is really, really stupid. It contradicts the film this game is based on in several fundamental ways. And it's not like the Ugly Dolls film is like a masterwork of intertwined plot threads. We're talking like really basic stuff that's hard to fuck up with an adaptation. Like in the film, the robots from Perfection are not the ones obsessed with making everything perfect and tidy. They're just in Perfection to be arbiters of the rules. And in the film, at the end, the town of Perfection is no longer called Perfection because of the events that happened during the film. And also, people freely wander from Perfection into Uglyville and back to Perfection, including the robots. Everybody's friends at the end of the movie. But for some bizarre reason I just can't understand, this video game thought it needed to have enemies. And the enemies are really a non-threat most of the time. Even if that health bar in the upper left you're seeing right there goes down all the way, all that happens is you teleport back to Lucky Bat's tea house. And that's a minor inconvenience. It's not like you lose anything serious, you just have to walk back to where you were previously. And sure, there are an abundance of enemy types, robot types, I suppose, that all do different things, but all of them just mildly inconvenience you. Death is meaningless in this game. Especially since, it's not actually death, but I'm saying failure is meaningless. So there's no need to program a failure state. People level that complaint at LEGO a lot. I disagree with it, because in LEGO you lose studs. And if you care about collecting studs during the game, and not just during the post-game, that's a genuine problem. And, like, the combat in LEGO games can be engaging and fun to puzzle out. So that's another thing it has going by having enemies. In Ugly Dolls, all you can really do is evade the robots or temporarily trap them. And there's no penalty for losing besides walking back to where you just came from. In addition, the robots make the story stupid and non-functional. So let's compare this to Monster High New Ghoulan School again. In Monster High New Ghoulan School, there's like a really irritating main storyline where you're saving the school from an evil zombie apocalypse and maybe the world. And it's awful. It's very poorly written, and it's not engaging, and the characters all make stupid decisions. But there's like all these side missions and the extracurricular activities, and all you do in those is wander around the school, talking to people, and helping them with things that you might think would happen in extracurricular activities, like people arguing about which dress looks the best, or how to interpret artistic work, or whether someone said something that was out of line, or helping someone discover their passion in cooking. It's just nice things. You're doing nice things for nice people to help them. And while those side missions and extracurricular activities aren't the main focus of the game, unfortunately, at least they're there. But in Ugly Dolls the video game, everything you do has something to do with the terrible overarching story involving the robots. The retcon bots, if you will. And I really cannot fathom why. Why did there need to be an overarching story about fighting a bunch of robots?
Thanks to your help, the Ugly Dolls had everything needed to build a super high-tech pipe sealing machine. This marvelous mechanical contraption used state-of-the-art materials to seal the pipe to perfection, preventing any more robots from coming through. Let's watch! Be amazed as the machine deploys Stage 1, the sturdy wooden door. Then gasp as it completes Stage 2, wedging a chair under the door handle. Behold, like that, no more robots could come through the pipe, even if they knocked really politely or pretended to have an important delivery. Leave your fake delivery under the doormat, robots. We'll pick it up later, thank you very much. But even though no more robots could arrive, there were still loads of them already stuck in Uglyville. We needed a way to draw them all together in one place. We needed a clever plan. We needed cake.
Now, to be fair, in the Ugly Dolls movie, there is an overarching story and a massive, super serious cinematic conflict with a bad guy. But all of that is in service to its moral. Ugly Dolls is a film with an explicit moral, an uncompromising moral, and everything it does is in service to that end. This game does not have a moral. It does not have anything to teach anyone, nor does it even want to try to teach anything to anyone. It also doesn't have any compelling characters, and the characters it does have contradict their movie counterparts. So, like, why is there a story? Why are there enemies? Why is there a massive cinematic conflict? What is that in service to? If it exists for the sake of itself, that's not enough, because it actively makes the game worse, and it contradicts its source material. So it's got far more negative going for it than it could ever have just by existing for its own sake. I would like to propose that a version of this game, where the gameplay is largely unchanged, but there are no robot enemies, would be a much better experience. You would walk around Uglyville, talking to all the Ugly Dolls you know from the movie. They would ask you to help them with things, and helping them with things would almost always be crafting, or fetch quests, or platforming puzzles. So the gameplay would be pretty much entirely the same. You'd feel better about it. It would make more sense that way. It would fit with the spirit of the movie. It would fit with the spirit of the characters. In the Ugly Doll movie, when you see Uglyville and people in Uglyville, like, yeah, everybody's a little wonky and zany, but everybody loves each other, and they'd help each other at the drop of a hat with pretty much anything. And they might do it in different ways, but they're all nice to each other. You know? Like, this could easily have just been a game about helping the Ugly Dolls prepare for a big festival. Wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't it be nice if instead of trying to stop a robot fucking invasion right now, I was just talking to the other Ugly Dolls and helping them craft things for a big festival? Like, I could get a dance party together, and I could get, like, maybe someone wants to put on a play or something at the festival, and somebody wants to bake a big cake for the festival, and, you know, like, pretty much all the objectives could even be the same if it were a festival instead of a robot invasion. Whatever the fuck this game's weird obsession is with having enemies and antagonists and a weird dramatic conflict that has to come from some sort of immediate threat to someone's physical being, I feel like it should have been nipped in the bud pretty early on. Like, almost all of the gadgets used for dealing with the robots are pretty garbage, too. There's one that traps them in a bubble, but it only traps them in a bubble for a little bit. There's a couple that let you sneak around them, but usually you can just walk around any robot with ease. With a few exceptions. It's like, you wouldn't even lose anything by removing the robots or the items you craft to deal with robots. and the rest of the game could be the same. It's a case where just like removing some seriously big developmental costs would have made your game better. Less would have been so much more, and you could have spent that money on more variety in the environment and actually making Uglyville fucking look like it does in the movie, maybe. That would have been cool, because it sure as hell doesn't look anything like it does in the movie. In the movie, it's this fantastical wonderland of weird felt people in their weird felt town, and there's cardboard and buttons and everything's beautiful and toy-like, and it's this surreal, magical place that the opening song in the film does way more justice to than I could explaining it to you. And you don't really get that from this game. In this game, Uglyville is flat and boring, and all the patchwork houses look flat and boring, and the sky looks flat and boring, and the sun isn't even a giant button like it is in the movie. So to recap, as a licensed product, this game contradicts its source material in several ways in spite of it being a sequel to its source material. This game doesn't even have the characters from the source material in anything but name and physical design. They behave completely differently in this game than they do in the movie. And they can't get the visuals of the film's universe right. Not even a little. This doesn't look anything like Uglyville, or anything from the movie, really. It is a colossal, tragic failure as a licensed product. Absolute disaster. Even if this was just an UglyDolls game with no movie attached, it would still be a tragic, colossal failure. This game just does a horrible injustice to the UglyDolls license, but especially the UglyDolls movie that it's based on. But you know, if we're gonna ignore that this is a licensed product, which no one should have to do, licenses should enhance the game, not be something you need to ignore to enjoy it. But if we're ignoring this is a licensed product, what's there in the game? Like is it all right without that? I mean, I don't know. I don't really think so. So, how I feel about the game is it kind of reminds me of ToeJam and Earl Back in the Groove. And I want to be perfectly clear, I absolutely adore ToeJam and Earl Back in the Groove. Played it for 30 hours on launch week. Played the online mode so much. Still play the online mode whenever I can. More people should be playing the game online, please. But I think it's beautiful. Love that game. This game reminds me of that one. It's got this weird-ass 2D kind of flat-looking sprite moving around in a semi-3D world, just like Back in the Groove. It's got meandering enemies that run at you as soon as they notice you, just like Back in the Groove. Most of the game is collecting items in a giant open-world collectathon while vaguely moving around meandering enemies, like Back in the Groove. It's just like the specifics that are the problem. The feedback for everything in Back in the Groove is just a lot more satisfying, and the mechanics mesh together a lot better. The only thing you really do in this game is craft things for people or find things for people. And exploring by itself is never a reward. You don't really find anything cool just by exploring for the sake of exploring. And any items you unlock are so specific that you're really only going to use them to complete objectives that the story sets you on. There's no reason to explore in this game just for the sake of exploring, but in Back in the Groove, I think the best thing you can do is explore just for the sake of exploring. There's just so much to do in that game. And here's a shocker. Both UglyDolls, the video game, and ToeJam and Earl Back in the Groove are procedurally generated. You might not guess it, but yeah, both of them are. Like, that's an advertised feature of ToeJam and Earl, so that's not a surprise. But I was surprised to find that out about fucking UglyDolls. Apparently the street layouts are procedurally generated. I couldn't even tell until I looked it up. I played through this game one time without knowing that, and then I played through it a second time on the same night. Both times to the finish, and like, I couldn't even tell. Like, there were some things that were obviously in slightly different places, but all of the major story important stuff looks the same. So it being procedurally generated doesn't matter. In Toe Jam and Earl Back in the Groove, everything is procedurally generated. Everything's in a random, weird place, but in Ugly Dolls, it seems like only unimportant things are in random, weird places, which defeats the purpose, because you don't really interact with random, unimportant things. The game encourages you to only interact with important story things. There are set pieces in this game that are just set in stone, and almost everything you interact with is a set piece in some way. I know I'm using set piece very liberally, but it works here, so just live with it. But, you know, so like, let's get more into the mechanical depth of this game, now that we've covered the broad strokes. There are a bunch of boxes lying around. You search the boxes by holding down the Y button, and the boxes spit out crafting ingredients. The crafting ingredients all have varying levels of rarity, and they all come from different styles of box. Like, you can tell by looking at the box what kind of ingredients are likely to come out, and how rare the ingredients inside might be. So that's nice. And of course you need specific ingredients to craft specific things, which means you'll be running around looking for certain kinds of boxes, or you could do like me and just open every single box you see, so that way you won't have to worry about a shortage until you reach the very end of the game. But yeah, it is nice that there are indicators of the boxes so you can find out which ones are of which rarity and which ones contain which things. Like, you might think that's pretty bare minimum, but I like that it's communicated in an inoffensive way. It's a thing you can tell just by looking at the box and the ground surrounding it. It's immediately recognizable, and they should get points for that, even if you can circumvent it just by opening every box. Alright, so this is a timed door. We can't possibly get inside the door in time unless we craft some sprinting shoes and use those sprinting shoes. So here's an example of one of the times where the gadgets actually are necessary because the story demands that you use them. But later in the game, there are gadgets that are useful in pretty much every situation. That also makes them overpowered, though, and completely breaks the game balance to such a degree that you can just flat out ignore most of the platforming puzzles for the second half of the game. So that's not good. That's not good at all. The items you craft are meant to be used for puzzle platforming and helping people, but if you just have one item that's better than all the others, it really, like, really makes the variety of items you can craft seem kind of pointless, doesn't it? And all the items you craft are limited use. They either have a set number of uses or a meter that runs out while you use them. But as long as you're picking up every box you see, like opening every single box and getting all the items out and only crafting what you need, then it will never be a problem. You will never be low on resources. And it's not like it's incredibly tough management. It's just that the game lets you know when you gotta use a specific thing. And anything that doesn't need to be used that you might want to use, you probably shouldn't. Like, you don't gotta use the health refilling stuff. I do it a couple times in this video for flavor, but there's no reason to, because losing all your health just moves you back to the tea house, and then you just gotta walk back a little. You just gotta walk back to where you were before you died. It's really not an issue.
And so, Wage unleashed her powers of cakery cooking and baked the most delicious-smelling cake you can imagine. Ah, yes, I smell chocolate and vanilla and those little rainbow sprinkles. The delicious cakery smell wafted across Uglyville and out to the lands around. Wherever they were, the robots stopped whatever robot-y thing they were doing and set off in search of cake. After all, cake which smelled that delicious couldn't possibly be a trap, right? Success! With all the robots together in Uglyville, we just needed to get them back through the pipe to have this game finished in no time, with absolutely no surprises or twists of any kind. In a surprise twist which absolutely no one saw coming, when we tried herding the robots back through the pipe, they started to hide. Apparently, the robots were communicating with each other wirelessly, whatever that means. Computers, eh? They'll never catch on. Anyway, we needed to disrupt that wireless signal by doing technical computer stuff. But first, we had a new member of our team. chef extraordinaire and baker of all yummy treats, it's Wage! Yeah! Woo! Too much? I think that was too much. I need a cup of tea.
So to recap, the primary method of exploration is opening boxes. The boxes are well designed so that just by looking at them you can tell what the inside might be, what contents are in there, and their rarity. That's nice, but you don't really need to have that information because if you just open every box you run across, you'll pretty much always have enough for anything you could need to progress the story. And as there are no side objectives, that's the only thing you have to care about. As for the variety in items, the story tells you specifically when some of them are absolutely necessary to complete an objective, but for the times when a specific item isn't necessary, there's a couple of items you can use just to cheese any challenge or platforming puzzle completely. So, the craft boxes and the items you craft from them, massive failures, both of those. That's not great. That's like half the gameplay. So what else is there? Well, there's finding stuff. Finding stuff that isn't the boxes full of craft items, I mean. And finding stuff is all about pathfinding. Somebody will tell you they want a certain amount of something or want you to find a certain special something, and then you go and look for it and complete a platforming challenge to obtain it. The platforming challenges, however, are also easily cheesed by the one or two craftable items that are useful for almost every circumstance. So, you know, that's also not good. But how does the platforming feel? It feels like slippery. It feels really slippery. So to recap, the craft boxes, don't gotta pay attention to which box is which, because if you just open all of them you'll be fine. The item variety doesn't matter because only one or two of the items are really useful, and the ones that are needed are always explicitly explained to you. The platforming, really slippery and awkward. The puzzles, you can cheese them using the one or two universally useful craftable items. Wow, this gameplay has no value. That's kinda sad. So let's say we're grasping at straws here. There's gotta be something positive you can say about this video game, right? The music is inoffensive. It would be pleasant to listen to by itself, but it's a little obnoxious to listen to for an hour and a half since it's like the only track that plays. It's a little obnoxious to listen to it for that long straight. But yeah, the music is inoffensive. Everything in the game technically functions. I haven't really found any glitches or anything like that. But that's about it. Even the UI makes really annoying discordant noises. And you might argue that's part of the point, and I would agree if this game had a point, but unlike the film it does not. So is there anything else to analyze or talk about at all? I mean, we can talk about the fact that there is co-op multiplayer. Another reason that this reminds me of Back in the Groove. But in Back in the Groove, you can just fuck off and do whatever you want, and explore on your own and complete whatever objectives you want by yourself or with your friend. You don't gotta like be glued to each other or anything. And while this game does have split screen, so you can technically both wander anywhere you want, the way objectives appear on your map makes it kind of impractical. The objectives appear one at a time, even the ones that involve pathfinding, and if you want to go out of your way to get them in a non-linear order, you have to open the map, which stops what the other player is doing, and you'll have to reopen it every time you want to reorient yourself. And I don't know about you, but I think that sounds awful. Like, an objective marker will appear, and you could both race toward the same objective, but then one of you is going to get it first, and that person's probably going to get the next one first too, and so on, which makes the second player feel superfluous. Or, you could try to go after different objectives, but that would mean one of you would have to constantly be opening and closing the map, which freezes the gameplay entirely. And that doesn't sound fun to me. So what's most likely to happen in co-op is one of you is going to actually be doing the objectives, and the other one's going to be running around collecting buttons and opening boxes. So that way the main player can complete the objectives. And that may be more efficient, but does it sound fun to you? Does it? Like, if it does, that's fine, you know? But I think it sounds pretty awful given what I've explained about how the game works. There are some games where I think that dynamic could be done really well, but this is not one of them. And you know, you might be thinking, I've been seeing you pick up buttons, and you mentioned buttons just a second ago, but I haven't seen you really do anything with buttons, and what you have done with buttons you haven't really explained? You know, that's fair. Let me explain how buttons work. You need 1,000 of them to finish the game. There's an actual literal pay gate as the final objective that requires you find 1,000 of these fucking buttons lying around. You want to know what else buttons are for? You want to know what else you can do with them? You can buy gadgets with them. Gadgets that you normally craft, so why would you need to buy them? Or you can buy recipes to craft new things with them. But you get the most useful stuff from the story anyway. And eventually you have to buy all the craftable items at the end. The game won't let you finish it otherwise. So it doesn't matter. It's not like it's optional or for fun or anything. It's just a giant paywall. It's just a big old paywall. Big old collectathon paywall. And it's not even fun like most collectathon paywalls try to be, because the buttons respawn every time you enter and exit the tea house. So it's just chores, just busy work, just a giant grind. This game is just a huge grind. The economy and sense of discovery is completely fucked, not just by the stuff I already mentioned, but by the fact that all of it respawns. All of the buttons come back. All of the boxes full of item ingredients come back. Everything comes back. Everything that's not immediately story important. So exploring is like pointless. You can just leave the tea house and re-enter, and leave the tea house and re-enter, and collect everything immediately around the tea house over and over if you like. And that might be a more efficient method early on than actually exploring in this exploration-focused video game. Like, holy shit. I can tell you for sure that at the end of my second run, when I was running out of a certain kind of ingredient, I didn't go looking for it. I knew there were some near the tea house, so I just entered the tea house and then left so it would respawn. And I did that 3 or 4 times until I had enough ingredients. Wow. How cool. I really feel like I'm engaging with the game's exploration in the intended fashion. Thanks, UglyDolls the video game. To summarize everything I've said in the video so far, UglyDolls is a failure as a licensed game. It's a failure as its own video game. It's a failure in fundamental ways that a video game should try, like, to generally not suck at in almost every circumstance where it's not trying to be performance art about the idea of sucking at things. That doesn't mean you're awful if you like the game, or if you bought it, or anything. Like, in spite of everything I've said, and this might be a real shocker to hear, in spite of everything I've said, I like the game. I just think the game is fucking terrible. I think it's absolutely awful. Like, it's been a really long time since I've seen a video game that's this big a failure at so many things all at once, and achieves pretty much nothing it set out to do on any level. I can't even, like, give a good reason why I like the game in spite of it being so awful. I think I just like it because it's abnormal. It's just such a weird game. The structure of the game is weird. The idea that anyone would want to participate in the structure of this game is a weird idea. The game looks hideous to the degree that I wonder how it got greenlit looking the way it does. Like, they had to know that the way it looked would not reflect kindly upon sales. There are so many baffling design decisions. Like, I don't even understand why it's procedurally generated. What does that add to the game? Doesn't that take more effort for, like, no reason? Absolutely bonkers, the way this game was made and how it functions. So yeah, it's awful. I don't think I would recommend it. I especially wouldn't recommend the multiplayer. And I love it. Having a great time. One of my favorite early Christmas presents. Probably my favorite.